Montana Territory, spring of 1879. The wind carried the scent of thawing earth and betrayal. Mira Dovell gripped the edge of the wagon bench, her knuckles white against the cracked wood. Her father's voice still rang in her ears, harsh and final. "I signed the papers, Mira. You belong to Mr. Garrison now. He paid for the land. And for you." She had not cried. Not when the ink dried. Not when her father turned away. Not when the iron-muscled men working for Rulon Garrison hoisted her meager trunk into the wagon like it weighed nothing. She would not give them her tears. The land blurred past as the wagon rattled south. She did not know how many miles had passed, only that each one took her farther from the Dovell Ranch and the life she'd known. Her fingers clutched the silver locket at her throat, her mother's. She breathed slow, steady, silent. Rulon Garrison's ranch rose from the land like a scab, all sharp timber and stone, surrounded by barbed wire and men with rifles. The house was too big. The windows stared like eyes. Mr. Garrison stood on the porch, his black coat dustless, his smile tight with triumph. "You will call me husband now," he said, not offering his hand. She said nothing. That night, she locked the bedroom door and lay on the cold mattress, staring at the ceiling. He had not touched her, not yet. But she saw it in his eyes, a man who believed money made him rightful. The next morning, he made it clear. "Your father owed me 10,000. I own every inch of that land now, including you. You will learn obedience." She spent the days sewing in silence, her fingers raw. The ranch hands watched her with pity, but none dared interfere. She heard the way Garrison yelled at his men, how he struck the cook across the mouth when breakfast was late. He ruled with fear. On the 10th day, she slipped out at dawn and walked the fence line, pretending to clear stones. The air was thin, the prairie grass brittle under her boots. That was when she saw him, a man on horseback beyond the fence, watching. He sat tall in the saddle, wearing buckskin and braids, his eyes sharp beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His horse shifted, but he was still. Lakota, she knew at once. Their eyes met. She looked away first. The next morning he was there again, and again the next. He never spoke, only watched. "Stay away from the north field," Garrison warned her one afternoon. "There's savages out there." But she went. She needed the silence, the stillness, and she needed to see that man. On the 4th morning, he dismounted. "You should not be here," he said, voice low, steady. "It is not safe." "I have nowhere else to be," she replied. His gaze flicked to the bruises on her wrist, the fresh one blooming under her collarbone. He said nothing, but his jaw tightened. "I am Mira," she said. He hesitated. "Quinn Daskota." She held his gaze. "Lakota?" He nodded once. He returned the next day with a canteen and dried meat. She ate slowly, watching him with cautious eyes. He never asked questions. He only listened when she spoke. "I did not choose this," she said once. "I know. Days pass like that. A word here, a silence there." She watched his hands, how gentle they were with his horse. She listened to the way he spoke of the land of wind and snow and stars. He was patient. Still. Then, one day, she did not come. Quinn waited through the morning. When she did not appear, he rode closer. From the tree line, he saw the ranch smoke curling from the chimney, 2 men dragging something from the porch. It was her. Blood on her mouth. Her hands limp. He turned his horse and rode hard. That night, he returned. Alone. He moved like shadow, slipping past the fence line, between barns. He found the servant girl first, the one who had once left bread near the fence. She pointed him to the cellar. Mira was chained to a post, her back raw from a whip. Her breath hitched when she saw him. "Quinn." He knelt beside her, his voice low. "I am getting you out of here." "You should not be here," she whispered. I could not stay away. He broke the chain with a hammer and wrapped her in his coat. She leaned into him without protest. He carried her past the barns, through the shadows, and onto his horse. They rode north through the night. She clung to him, her body trembling, but not from cold. At dawn, they reached the edge of Lakota land, safe for now. He made a small fire and laid her down on his bedroll. Her fingers touched his cheek. You risked everything. He looked at her, steady. You were everything. She exhaled long and slow and let her hand rest against his chest. And for the first time in 10 days, she slept. The snow on the higher ridges had begun to melt, feeding the creeks that wound through the foothills like veins. Quinn led the horse slowly beneath the pine canopy, careful not to jostle her. Mira's head rested against his shoulder, her breath shallow but steady. When he reached the shelter beneath the stone outcrop, he eased her down with quiet hands. She stirred only when his coat left her shoulders. I can stand, she murmured, though her knees told otherwise. You don't need to, he answered, already laying fresh branches in the pit where he kept a fire banked through cold nights. The flint sparked on the first strike. Soon, warmth pushed back the morning chill. She sat close to the flames, her arms wrapped around herself. Her lips were split. Her eyes were open, but far away. He set a tin of water at the edge of the heat. I'll bring roots. Boil them down. They'll help the bruising. Her gaze followed him as he stepped into the trees. When he returned with wild ginger and a handful of willow bark, she had not moved. He crouched beside the fire, slicing the ginger with the bone-handled knife he'd carried since boyhood. She watched the blade, not the man. Did you ever have a home like this? She asked, her voice raw as the skin on her back. He placed the roots into the pot. When I was a boy, before the soldiers burned it. She didn't flinch, but her fingers closed over her knees until the knuckles paled. My mother used to tell stories by the fire, she said after a while. Not ones with happy endings. Just ones where people kept going. He gave a single nod. That's the truest kind. They ate pine nuts and dried meat. She chewed slowly, wincing now and then. He offered her water but didn't press when she took only a sip. Afterward, he unrolled a second blanket and laid it near hers, not touching. The flickering light caught the edge of her locket. She brushed it beneath her collar. Do you think he'll come after me? She asked. He will. But not here. Not soon. She looked toward the trees. Because of your people? Because this land isn't his to take. Silence stretched between them, not heavy, just there. The fire cracked. An owl called from deeper in the woods. I want to believe there's something after this, she said. Not heaven. Just something that doesn't hurt. There is, he said without hesitation. Her eyes met his. Have you found it? He didn't look away. Not yet. The next morning she tried to walk. He steadied her when her legs gave out. She didn't ask for help, but she didn't push his hands away either. They moved slowly along the stream, her arm over his shoulders, his other hand at her waist to keep her upright. You're quiet, she said as they paused at a smooth boulder under the sun. So are you. She smiled, faint but there. I don't remember the last time anyone let me be. He knelt to fill the canteen. You're not a thing to be let. She fell silent again, looking at the water. That night, he brought her a carved wooden bowl, smoothed by years of use. She turned it over in her hands, the shape simple but made with care. It was my sister's, he said. Before the sickness. Mira held it gently. You had family close? Once. She didn't ask more. He respected that. The land taught them both that some wounds didn't close just because they were spoken aloud. Later, as they sat near the fire, her blanket drawn up to her chin, she said, You don't look at me like I'm broken. You're not. She turned her face toward the flames. If I stay here, if I never go back. You don't have to, he said. Not ever. Her breath caught. She said nothing more that night, but when the fire fell to embers, she shifted her blanket closer to his. Not touching. Just near. By the 5th day, the color had returned to her face. She walked farther, helped gather wood, even laughed once when a squirrel dropped bark on her shoulder. He watched her quietly, not wanting to startle the sound away. When the sun dipped low and the shadows grew long, she stood looking out over the valley. He came to stand beside her. Do you think I'll always be afraid? She asked. He thought for a while before answering. Maybe, but you'll still be free. She looked up at him then, really looked. You made that true. He didn't move. Didn't speak. She took one step closer, so their shoulders nearly brushed. Thank you, she said, voice steady now. For seeing me. Not just saving me. He turned toward her. You were never lost. And for the first time, she believed it. By the 7th morning, Mira no longer walked behind Quinn. They moved side by side through the tall grass, her stride still stiff but firm with purpose. The wind had shifted, warmer now, carrying the scent of wet sage and pine resin. She didn't speak often, but when she did, her voice had shed its brittleness. They spent most of the day in the valley basin, where Quinn taught her how to spot animal tracks in the soft earth and how to tell which plants would keep through the heat. She knelt beside him without flinching, her hands steady as he showed her how to split a stalk clean with the knife. "You always knew how to survive out here?" she asked, brushing grit from her palms. "No one's born knowing," he replied, glancing toward the tree line. "But once you learn to listen, the land tells you what it needs." She traced a notch in the bark of a cottonwood tree. "And what does it say now?" "That it's watching to see what you'll make of yourself." That made her pause. Then she stood, shading her eyes against the sun. "Then I better make something worth watching." Near midday, they crossed a patch of dry earth where a broken fence had collapsed under a fallen tree. Quinn crouched to examine the splintered wood. "Who built that?" Mira asked, stepping carefully over a twisted nail. "Soldiers. Years ago. They tried to keep the herds from migrating through here." She looked across the open plain. "They always leave things half done, don't they? Only when they never meant to stay." They walked until the sun dipped behind the ridge. That night, they camped near a creek where the water ran fast and clear. Quinn caught a rabbit with a snare line, and Mira dressed it with quiet precision, her face set with concentration. When the meat sizzled over the fire, she leaned back on her elbows and watched the sky darken to blue. "There's something I need to ask you," she said, her tone careful. He waited. "If I wanted to stay where no one could find me, not just Garrison, but anyone who thinks a woman's place is in someone else's hands, could I do that here?" "You could," he said. "But you wouldn't be alone. Not unless you wanted to be." She didn't answer right away. "Then, I don't." The silence that followed wasn't heavy or uncertain. She reached over and took the knife from his belt, inspecting the worn hilt. "This blade's seen things," she said. "So have you." She handed it back. "Would you teach me how to throw it?" He nodded once. Tomorrow, as the fire settled to coals, Mira sat cross-legged on her blanket, her back to the wind. She peeled a strip of bark from a branch and began shaping it with her fingernails. "I remember a teacher once," she said. "He told me I asked too many questions for a girl." Quinn didn't smile, but something eased in his expression. "You ask the right ones." She looked up. "You never told me what your name means." "Daskota?" He stirred the coals. "It was my grandfather's. He said it meant the wind that moves before the storm." She turned the word over in her mouth. "That suits you." When she lay down that night, she pulled her blanket closer to his, just enough that their shoulders touched. He didn't move away. The next day, she practiced with the knife. Quinn set up a target against a stump and showed her the motion: elbow loose, wrist steady, breath held at the throw. She missed the first two, then sliced the edge on the third. She didn't cheer. She just tried again. By evening, she hit the center. "You're quick," he said. "I had to be," she replied. They moved their camp the following morning, deeper into the hills. The trees grew thicker there, and the air held a hush that made voices seem loud. They found a cave tucked behind a curtain of vines, half hidden in the rock face. Mira stepped inside first. "It's dry," she said. "Good for storms." Quinn built a fire ring at the mouth. Mira hauled stones without being asked. By dusk, they had a place that felt like more than shelter. That night, as they sat by the flames, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't speak. Her hand slid into his, fingers curling between his. "Quinn, if I stay with you, will I be free here?" He turned, meeting her eyes. "You already are, Mira." She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Then she laid her head in his lap, eyes closing to the rhythm of the fire's crackle. In the dark, his hands stayed wrapped around hers. Neither of them let go. The rains came in the second week of May, soft at first, then steady. Water beaded on the ferns outside the cave mouth, and the stream below swelled and ran heavy with silt. The days turned quiet, the kind of quiet that asks nothing but attention. Mira spent those hours weaving dry grasses into cords, her fingers growing more certain with each twist. Quinn carved a snare hook from elk bone and didn't speak unless she did. One afternoon, she watched the clouds gather low over the ridgeline. "I used to think storms were punishment," she said. Quinn paused his carving. "And now I think they remind the land who it belongs to." He nodded once, then returned to his work. Later, when the rain lightened, she walked barefoot to the edge of the slope where the trees opened wide. The light was silver, the hills blurred with mist. She stood there for a while, arms loose at her sides, letting the air lift her hair away from her neck. Quinn came to stand behind her, not too close. "I never asked how old you were when your mother died," she said, eyes still forward. 13. "I was 11, she said. "She had a cough. Wouldn't stop. My father said prayer would do more good than medicine. He buried her before the frost lifted." Quinn didn't speak. "I hated him for that. I still do, I think. Even if he's dead." She said it without flinching. He walked beside her and crouched near the edge, brushing his thumb through the damp moss. "You don't have to forgive people who never tried to be better." She looked down at him. "You're the first person who's ever said that like it's allowed." He didn't look up, but she saw his mouth twitch slightly, not in humor, just understanding. That night, the fire would burn slow and low. Mira unwrapped a cloth bundle she'd hidden in the side of her bedroll. She unfolded it with care, revealing a worn leather-bound book with corners softened by years. "My mother taught me to read with this," she said. "She said if I could hold a story, I'd never be empty." Quinn leaned closer, not touching. The pages were marked by candle soot and finger oil. "Will you read something?" he asked. She hesitated, then turned to a page marked by a pressed wildflower. Her voice was quiet but steady, shaped by memory. The words were from an old poem, something about mountains and patience, about standing still until the world softened around you. When she reached the end, she closed the book and held it close to her chest. "I never read it aloud before," she said. Quinn watched her, eyes steady. It was meant to be heard. The rain returned before sunrise, heavier this time. The cave stayed dry, but the air turned raw. Mira woke cold, her blanket damp at the edges. She sat up, rubbing her arms. Quinn stirred the banked coals, then stood and stepped outside. She followed, squinting into the gray morning. A deer had come near the edge of the clearing, its tracks still fresh in the mud. Quinn knelt to study them, then glanced back. "You want to follow it?" She nodded. They tracked it for over an hour through thick underbrush and across a shallow stream. He showed her how to move without snapping branches, how to read the broken pattern of hoof prints through the ferns. When they caught sight of it again, Mira froze. It was young, a doe, standing still beneath a pine, ears flicking. Quinn handed her the bow. She didn't take it. "I don't want to kill anything today," she said softly. He reached for the weapon and slung it over his back without a word. On the way back, they didn't speak. The silence between them had changed, no longer cautious, just full. Later, as they boiled a pot of roots and dried meat, Mira leaned against the cave wall, legs drawn to her chest. "What will you do once the weather clears?" she asked. "I thought I'd ask you the same." She watched the steam rise. "I want a place with a garden. Chickens, maybe. A little stove where I can bake bread without anyone yelling if it burns." Quinn stirred the pot once. "I know a spot west of here, near the cottonwoods. Flat land. Good water." She looked up from the fire. "You've seen it. Camped there once." It felt like a place that could grow things. She was quiet for a while, then said, "Do you think people like us can start again?" "You already have," Quinn answered. She stood and crossed the space between them. Her hands were calloused now, her posture straighter. She knelt beside him, resting one hand on his knee. I don't want to do it alone. You won't, he said. She leaned in and pressed her lips to his slow, sure, without apology. When she drew back, her forehead rested against his. I trust you, she said. And I don't say that lightly. I know. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. For the first time since they'd fled, the world felt like it was waiting for them, not chasing. They lay side by side that night, her head on his chest, his arm around her waist. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The storm had passed. The land had listened, and something new had begun. The first warm morning came with the hush of melting frost. Mira stood ankle-deep in the stream, her skirt hitched to her knees, scrubbing the last of winter's soot from Quinn's shirt. Her hands moved with quiet purpose, knuckles red from the cold water, but she didn't flinch. From the slope above, Quinn watched her work, his arms full of gathered willow reeds for the lean-to they planned to build farther west. We'll need more nails before we start the roof, he said as he reached the bank. She wrung the shirt and looked up. There's a trading post near the pass. 2 days' ride if we go light. I've been that way. The man who runs it Harlan, he trades fair if you speak plain. Mira draped the shirt over a rock. Then we'll leave at first light. They packed only what they needed. She tucked her mother's book between the folds of Quinn's blanket. He tied the knife sheath high on his saddle and checked the straps twice before mounting. They didn't speak much on the ride, but they didn't need to. The trail was narrow and wound through old burns, where fire-blackened trees stood like sentinels. Twice they stopped to water the horses and stretch, sharing dried apples and a wedge of salt pork. That night, they camped beneath an outcropping of rock shaped like a bent knee. Mira boiled a bit of cornmeal into something thick enough to fill the belly. As they ate, she glanced toward him. You ever think about before? She asked. I mean, before all of this started. He swallowed and wiped his mouth. Sometimes, but it's like looking through smoked glass. I see what was, but I don't miss it. I used to think I'd spend my whole life trying to fix what other people broke. He didn't answer right away, just leaned back on his elbows. The firelight softened the sharp lines of his face. You're building now, he said finally. Not fixing. That's different. She nodded once, then reached for his hand. He let her lace her fingers through his, their palms pressed warm and sure. They reached the trading post near midday. It was more a cluster of buildings than a town, a bunkhouse, a livery, and a store with windows clouded from dust. Harlan came out wiping his hands on a rag, his beard peppered gray and his eyes sharp. Quinn tipped his hat, looking for nails, salt, and a length of canvas. Harlan squinted at Mira. You his. She stepped forward. On my own. But we're together. Harlan looked between them, then nodded once. Fair enough. They traded a pair of antlers, 2 rabbit pelts, and 1 carved spoon for the supplies. Before they left, Mira lingered by a weathered crate of seed packets. Take one, Quinn said. We've got room. She chose radish and beans. On the way back, they camped by a stand of aspens. The air was quiet, the sky clear. Mira spread the canvas over a stretch of packed earth and laid the seed packets beside her. I didn't think I'd want a future, she said. Not after everything. Quinn crouched beside her. What changed? I stopped thinking about surviving, started thinking about living. He brushed a curl of hair behind her ear. With me. With you. She leaned into him, their foreheads touching. The wind moved through the trees but didn't carry them apart. They reached the homestead site 3 days later. The land was as Quinn remembered, flat, ringed by cottonwoods, a spring-fed creek nearby. They cleared brush, marked out the corners of the lean-to, and drove stakes into the soil. Mira built the fire pit while Quinn framed the walls. She didn't ask if she was doing it right. She simply did it, and he let her. By late summer, the lean-to stood solid, with a roof of canvas and a floor of packed pine needles. They slept inside it on a bed of straw and wool, their bodies curled together in the cool night air. One morning, as the sun rose behind the hills, Mira pressed her hand to her belly and turned toward Quinn. "I think I'm carrying," she said, her voice steady. He sat up slowly, his eyes on hers. "You sure?" She nodded. "I've felt it. For a few weeks now." He reached for her hand and held it against his chest. "Then we build for 3. She smiled, soft and sure. "And teach them what freedom feels like." He kissed her then, not with urgency, but with the quiet promise of a man who'd found where he belonged. The days grew shorter. Mira planted the radishes in a patch near the creek. Quinn stacked wood against the lean-to enough to last through winter. They spoke often, but never of what was left behind. One night, as the first frost came, she lay beside him with her back to the fire, her breath warm against his neck. "You think we'll be old one day?" she asked. "If we're lucky." She laughed low in her throat. "I hope the baby looks like you." He kissed her temple. "I hope they look like both of us. Strong and steady." They fell asleep with their hands entwined, the fire burning low. Years passed. The child was born in the spring, a girl with her mother's eyes and her father's quiet watchfulness. They named her Willa, after the cottonwoods that sheltered them. She grew with dirt beneath her nails and sun on her cheeks, learned to speak 2 tongues, and knew her way around a bough by 7. Mira's garden stretched wide and green. Quinn built a second room onto the house, then a porch. At night, they sat together beneath the stars, Willa asleep inside, the land still and whole around them. "You still think about before?" Mira asked once. Quinn looked toward the hills. "Not anymore." She reached for his hand. "Me neither." They lived that way together, rooted, safe. Not just surviving. Living. Always.